Okay, what defines a chassid? Can a chassid be someone who doesn't follow halacha but is always growing? That is such a terribly uncomfortable question. Which means it's a good one. You see, when you ask the question, what defines a chassid, you have to define, what do you mean when you say what defines a chassid? And of course, what do you mean I ask you? Yeah. So I'll give you a little background. It's a great question. It really is a really good question. And it's a very disturbing question. It's a very real question. There was a Yid who lived in America with one of the most important Lubavitch chassidim in America. Really one of the most important. His name was Rabbi Yisrael Jacobson. He made one mistake in his life. He didn't have any sons. So there's all the Jacobs that we have are not his relatives. His oldest Edom was Zalman Hecht, who has beautiful mishpacha, and Mrs. Altein. Rebbetzin Altein was his daughter. So there's a kind of hara. Him and his wife both lived till 100 kamat, and a lot of people even in this classroom and are in this school are his descendants. Rabbi Jacobson came to America in 1926. It's 100 years ago this year that he came to America. The next year when the Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested, he was very instrumental in saving the Frierdiker Rebbe's life from here, from America. He was a big chassid. And he did amazing things. He was one of the most established. Building Lubavitch in America was very hard. And obviously once the Rebbe got here, it changed. But Rabbi Yisrael Jacobson was one of the key players in the early development of Lubavitch in America when it was all very hard and very small. Rabbi Jacobson was officially the founder of Beis Rivka. He was the menala of Beis Rivka, amongst 1,000 other jobs that he held. So the Frierdiker Rebbe once told Rabbi Jacobson, so there are drei sorten chassidim. Es doch chassidi hageze, chassidi hanusach, und es doch chassidi Chabad. The chassidim of Gezer, or as we like to say, Gezer. That means that they come from chassidim. Then there's chassidi hanusach. That means chassidim who follow the Lubavitcher customs. And then there's chassidi Chabad. And he explained. Chassidi hageze may not even be frum, but they come from chassidish roots. Now today, I mean, unfortunately it exists today. But 100 years ago and 80 years ago, there were thousands of people like that. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands, whose fathers were chassidim or grandfathers were chassidim. They came to America. Some of them made a lot of money. They felt deeply connected to the rebbe and deeply connected to Lubavitch because of their roots. Now, it's so many generations later, the children of those people don't even know that they have a connection to Lubavitch and Chabad. But then, I mean, the money that the Lubavitch Rebbeim raised in the 1940s and 50s and 60s was mostly from Chassidi Agezer, Chassidim who were not even from necessarily, but their fathers or grandfathers were very strong Chassidim, and they were big supporters of the Rebbeim. So were they Chassidim? Yeah, on the level of Chassidi Agezer, they were Chassidim. So when you say what defines a Chassid, depends what kind of definition. If a Chassid is Chassidi Agezer, any Yid who has a loyalty to the Rebbeim is in that category, even if he's not 100% frum, right? But the idea that he doesn't keep halacha but he's growing. I'll tell you a maaseh. There's a book out, which I didn't read, but I bought. I used to read much more. My eyes don't work like they used to. It's called The People's Rabbi. It's in English. It was written by David Zakmakovsky, who's good. It's about Rabbi Kramer from Montreal. Rabbi Kramer came to America in 1941 with the 9 Bachram that came from Poland through Japan. He became the Menal Gashmi, became the de facto leader of all of the Moises. He paid the bills. He raised the money and he paid the bills. For many, many, many years, he was the financial officer of all the Moises Chabad in Montreal. He's very, very important to the history of Lubavitch in Montreal. And his grandchildren commissioned this book called The People's Rabbi. I believe this story I'm about to tell you is in that book with a name. But I heard the story several times. Some of the people told me the story, told me the name, but the name was out my second ear before I went in the first, because it didn't mean anything to me. The Frierdiker Rebbe needed air conditioning. For the Frierdiker Rebbe, air conditioning in New York, which was very hot, it was probably hotter than the now, was life and death mamish. Frierdiker Rebbe was very ill. He had so many illnesses. He certainly suffered with his heart, cardiovascular stuff, and for a heart, if it gets too hot, your body can't cool itself down, it becomes much dangerous. An air conditioner in 1948 costed $10,000. I remember those air conditioners. They were the size of that cabinet, bigger. They were ceiling to floor, 3 feet across and 2 feet wide. They were massive, monstrous, ugly machines, noisy. I remember I davened in a shul that had an air conditioner. It was the size of a walk-in closet. They made so much noise, but they worked. Today you get a unit that takes up almost no space. The technology has grown incredibly. Air conditioning then was very new and very expensive. $10,000. The whole budget of Lubavitch was $50,000 a year. So you're talking about an exorbitant amount of money for a personal need. So the decision was made to ask people for money with the understanding that it's not stucca. That it's not stucca, this is for the fee to get it personal. So I don't know who, maybe the rebbe, maybe somebody else, reached out to the various members of Anash who were involved in work and fundraising and said, listen, the rebbe must have an air conditioner, it's life and death, but it's not stucca. It's not coming out of the kupa of Merkez, and people who give it have to know this is for the personal benefit of the rebbe. One of the people who was contacted was Rabbi Kramer, Rabbi Kramer. Rabbi Kramer had developed relationships with all the wealthy Jews in Montreal, and he met a woman who had given lots of tzedakah, and he told her this, she wasn't from. I don't know her background, but she was a Jewish woman with a very open heart. And he told her the story that the Rebbe needs an air conditioner, but you must understand that it's not tzedakah. She said, how much does it cost? $10,000. So she wrote a check for the full $10,000. $10,000 today, what is it now? It's at least $100,000, probably more. In the mentality, it's like $1 million. It was an enormous amount of money for an air conditioner. And the Rebbe got an air conditioner. Anyway, she eventually came to New York, and she met the Friedrich, she went to Yechidus. When she went into Friedrich to Yechidus, the Friedrich Rebbe started to praise her. But he praised her like as if she was Sadim, like a big tzaddik, like this holy lady who was like mamish, unbelievable. And the Rebbe was flattering her, was complimenting her in ways that were exaggerated. So she says, Rebbe, ich bin nicht frum. Rebbe, I'm not frum, I don't keep Shabbos. Rebbe, ich bin nicht frum, she kept kosher. Mr. She kept kosher then. Who didn't keep kosher then? Rebbe, ich bin nicht frum. And the Friedrich Rebbe told her, Tochter, it's hard for him to speak. Wer weiß, wer is frum? Who knows who is really frum? Friedrich Rebbe said, Tochter, wer weiß, wer is frum? Who knows who's from? I'm telling this story not that you should become fry and give tzedakah. I'm just bringing out the point about the chassidus of Chasidi again. The Chasidi HaNusach basically means simple Jews who daven the schari, keep Lubavitchim and Hagim. Now, in Europe, in Russia, half the Jews were Lubavitch. Half the Jews were Litvish, Misnagdim, half the Jews were Lubavitch. There were other Chassidus also, but in Russia the strongest Chassidus was Chabad, was Lubavitch. But most of the people who were Lubavitch only because they had Lubavitch traditions. They davened Nuschari, they made a lulav like we make a lulav, they verbringed it as Kislev, they were simple people. They were not big Chassidim, they were Pashte Yidden who followed traditions of Chabad because the Lubavitch community dominated Russia, the Rabbanim were Lubavitch Chassidim, the Rebbe was a Lubavitch Rebbe, and so on. So their being Chassidus was really more their custom, their tradition, the way of life. If they had children who were particularly bright, so they sent them to Lubavitch and they began to learn Chassidus and they became what we would call real Chassidim. In America, there's no such thing as simple people. They don't exist. The simplest person is so knowledgeable because of access to information, the internet and so on. Everybody knows. But there still are people who are honestly simple. Many Lubavitch Chassidim are not so learned. They're not so frum. They're not ibigishpitz. They're not radical. They're Lubavitchers because they come from Lubavitcher homes, because they were Mekudav through Lubavitch. They have a picture of the Rebbe on the wall. The Rebbe is very important to them. It's a level of Chassidus. It's a level of Chassidus. So now comes the question: if a person doesn't keep halacha, can you be in this middle category that's called Chasidi HaNusach? See, so I have to answer the question with a question. What do you mean keeping halacha? Doesn't keep Shabbos? No. You can't be a Lubavitch Chassid and not keep Shabbos. What do you mean doesn't keep halacha? Doesn't keep kosher? No. You cannot be Chasidi HaNusach and not keep kosher. Well, in other words, there's definitions of what halacha means. There's basic Yiddishkeit, and I don't mean chas v'shalom to belittle anything. To be a frum Jew, you have to keep Shabbos, you have to keep kosher, you have to use the mikveh, taras hamishpacha, and you have to put on tefillin every day. That makes you a frum person. Should you daven 3 times a day? Yeah, you should. If you miss a mincha, I'm not saying that it's justified, but that doesn't make you not frum. So can you be a chassid who doesn't keep halacha? It depends what the definition is. Now, of course, the issue that I've avoided, which I really shouldn't avoid, is tznius. Lubavitch has reached a point where people think that tznius is optional. It's like you say shomer negiah, now you have shomer tznius. Shomer negiah is a din in Shulchan Aruch. It's not a standard. You're not allowed to touch a girl or a boy when you're single. Finished. Now, there's standards of tznius, but there are people in Lubavitch who don't care what the Shulchan Aruch says. We're not talking about Midach Chassidus. They do not address tznius. It's against halacha. It's against halacha, period. This is where this becomes very, very, very tricky. What makes you a chassid? You know, there's a story. That's a true story. And I tell the story with names so that I can be corrected. Faket. Now it's good that I should say names so people should be able to tell me what I'm wrong. There was a Yid in Australia whose name was Klein. I have a cousin who's married to his daughter, Klein. My cousin, Yossi Paltiel, is married to Miriam Klein from Melbourne. Klein. This Mr. Klein was a Holocaust survivor. Came to Australia alone. He was a teenager, not a father, not a mother, not a brother, not a sister. If Mr. Klein had fried out, no one would even know. Let alone no one have any tightness. But Mr. Klein was one of those Jews. I don't know what kind of home he came from in the old country. He had huge Yerushalayim Tivis. Mr. Klein was a bocher all by himself. Was an edlich, a bocher in Melbourne in the 40s and the 50s. It was poshet. Tzaddik is an understatement. But Mr. Klein was clean shaven. He didn't have a beard. He was raising himself. He was trying to make a living, trying to establish himself. He married the daughter of a very big Lubavitcher chassid. His wife was Nocham Zalman Gerevich's daughter. Why did she marry a boy without a beard? What do you mean? He was a Shemesh Shabbos. He was a Shemesh Shabbos. So Mr. Klein married a very, what we would call Spitz, okay, Gez Shebegez, Lubavitcher girl, who also grew up in Melbourne. Her father was Taka Greisa Chassid, a very interesting Chassidish Yid from the old country, okay? And this Mr. Klein was a very sincere man. Ish Tamba Yashav Ereil Akim is a good Jew. But he always walked around with the chip that he's not good enough. You know, he married into a community with people of a much higher level than him. That's how he looked at himself. And he always felt like, he's like the black sheep. I don't know if he ever grew a beard. I don't know. I didn't know him. The truth of the matter is Mr. Klein was a tzaddik. He was so sincere. He was so emizdik. You know, a lot of people who are chassidim are players. This is who he was. He was a very real Jew. I never met him. This is a story that they tell. And when he came to New York to see the rebbe and a yechidus, and if somebody knows the story, please correct me. I'm posting this Q&A, so if someone can correct me, I'd like to the details. And he sort of apologized to the rebbe for not, I married Lubavitch, but I'm not Lubavitch, as if there was something wrong with him. And the rebbe asked him what he tries to do. And he told the rebbe, I try to every day be a little better than the day before. And the rebbe said to him, well, guess what? That's exactly what I try to do. So you're my chasid. I think that you're my chasid. You're my chasid. So when you say don't keep halacha, but growing, what does that mean? Growing means I want to tell myself I'm growing. Growing means when I got over all my excuses for why I don't keep halacha, I'll start keeping halacha. Growing when I get over all my trauma and all my blaming my father and my mother and my teacher and my school and my birth and my God, then I'll start growing. That's not growing. If growing means this is my level and I'm sincerely trying to become a better person, I think that's a chasid. There's no question about it, that's a chasid. So the question is framed in the kind of way that requires to add nuance. Because today, in the world, but in Lubavitch, you do whatever you want. What makes you normal, not radical? If you're less religious than me, you're fry. You're more religious than me, you're fanatical. You're exactly like me, you're perfect. Why? Because I decided. But on what basis? We have a rebbe, we have a Shulchan Aruch, we have a Torah, and we're supposed to have a conscience. A Lubavitcher chassid with a conscience, who's growing, is a chassid. A Lubavitcher rebbe without a conscience, whose whole attitude is that Yiddishkeit is my prison. And I want to get away with as much as I can get away with. And at the minute women are going to start covering less here, I'm going to join that group. And the women are going to take off chas v'shalom half the sheitel. I'm going to join that group. And I'm going to say I'm growing because in some emotional space, when you're going to stop getting over all of the tightness that you have to the whole world, maybe you'll think, where am I from? That's not a chassid. It isn't. And this is true in kashrus. You can go into every restaurant and eat. It says a hechsher. What? Wo, ven, vai. Kashrus. Kashrus, kosher is one of the most important. Kashrus and taras hamishpacha. You want from kids? Kashrus, taras hamishpacha. That's where it is. You don't mess around. So if a person is sincere, they're chasid. But if a person is playing games, they're gezer. They come from chassidim. This is the answer to the second madrega. What's called chassidei hanusach. Then you have chassidei Chabad. Chassidei Chabad is a deep thing. Chassidei Chabad is people. If you had to put it in a sentence, Chassidei Chabad are people who live for God and the Rebbe, period. There's no free nights and weekends. There's no vacation. A chasid is fire. His life is Yiddishkeit and the Eibishter. I'm reading by the biography of the Medal of Futafas now in bed until I fall asleep and I forget which page I'm holding. I reread the same page over and over and over again. It's very hard to read the book because the book is making me feel like a shmata. Because Reb Mendel was the real thing, and he's telling stories about chassidim that he knew from an earlier generation. And these people didn't know what the word compromise means. You know, when chassidim came to the Alter Rebbe, and they said to the Alter Rebbe, teach me how to be a chassid, what they were asking the Alter Rebbe is, tell me how to work hard. Tell me how to push myself. Tell me how to bring myself closer to the Eibishter. Not tell me how to like myself. Not tell me how to make myself comfortable in this world. Not tell me how I can have good self-esteem. I want to drive myself. Today it's almost a midah, it's almost bad. We've gotten so caught up in self-esteem that anybody who's trying to work hard, you say he's emotionally imbalanced because he doesn't know how to relax. The Rebbe did not relax for a second in his life. So you can say he was uptight, he was a nervous man. The Rebbe is a tzaddik gomer, a ish alakim. He can sustain that kind of life without becoming nervous. If you and I did that, we'd fall to pieces and burn the world around ourselves. But chassidim were people who wanted the emes. They wanted to serve Hashem, they wanted to be closer to the Eibishter. And the highest standard of a chassid is that he lives to serve his Rebbe. What's a Lubavitcher? A Lubavitcher is someone who serves the Rebbe. What does that mean? I thought I serve Hashem. Of course we serve Hashem. But in every generation there's Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu says serving the Eibishter today means this. And simply stated, serving Hashem in our generation means shlichus. It's not complicated. Now, is a teacher a shliach? Of course a teacher is a shliach. But the essence of it is, lech lecha, me'artzecha, me'meladecha. What's a chassid? Who serves his Rebbe. And there's so many chassidim who are so busy figuring out how to be chassidim that they have no time to get around to doing what the Rebbe wants. There's a missing link. A chassid is someone who's makusher. And makusha to the pulas of the Rebbe, meaning one way or another you do the Rebbe's work. That's a chassid. And Chassidei Chabad learn chassidus. And one of the things you have to know about Chassidei Chabad, and there still are a few, Chassidei Chabad were Yerei Shamayim Erabim. They were extremely God-fearing. I knew Jews who, whenever they saw a new Yid, they'd walk up to them and say, "Can I borrow your tefillin?" And in one day, he'd put on 10 pairs of tefillin, make 10 brachas. Why? Maybe your tefillin are better than mine. This is a Yerei Shamayim from a different generation that you don't see nowadays. People who were so careful, when they bought a pair of tefillin, they had to go to the best sefer and had to have all the hidurim. They wanted it to be perfect. When you bought it, it had to be perfect. Not because they wanted to show off, because they cared. When it came to Pesach, they were so careful. Today, the whole Pesach is how much I can get away with because I don't want to have a mental breakdown. We've forgotten our values. We've traded them in for psychology. I noticed on the list of questions, what's the juxtaposition of Chassidus and psychology? You don't want to wait for that rant. You're going to hear it, I promise you, don't worry. That's one of my favorite repeat speeches. Number 6212 is to push the button, you get the speech. So, I'll say this in closing, and then of course I'm going to let you ask me questions. I don't think there's a person who's not growing, unless he's not a person. A chassid who's not growing. And I don't think there's a person who's a chassid who's not conscientious about Allah. And I don't think there's a person who's conscientious about Allah who can find out that there's a new din that he didn't know about. There's a new hidden mitzvah that he didn't know about. There's a new chomer that he didn't know about. And he can keep more and higher. This is a chassid. And it's all in the background of shlichus. It's all in the background of serving the Rebbe. The Rebbe needs from us something, which is historic. It's historic, what the Rebbe created and what the Rebbe is continuing to create. is that there should not be a Jew in the world, who's not touched by the Rebbe, and is not given an opportunity to come closer to the Eibishter because of the Rebbe. And this happens because the Shluchim and Kol Pin and Nidach Shabbalim. You say, wow, Shluchim is so big. In 10 years from today, it's going to be twice as big, 3 times as big, 4 times as big. Shluchim are going to go to places where there's no way they're going to be able to make a parasa from the Shlichus. Guys and girls are going to go on Shlichus, and the Chatchil, they're going to have a job, a parasa, but they're going to be in a community with just 15 families, 25 families, whatever, there's vacation spots, and they're going to be Makarav Yidden. This is where the Rebbe's heart is. The Rebbe's heart is, don't lose one Jew. Mashiach is coming. Melech HaMashiach ba. Not one Jew should be lost. And that's the Rebbe's position. That's the Rebbe's vision. And of course, the Rebbe would say, it's not me. It's the Rebbe, the Shved. Everything is the Frierdiker Rebbe. But the Frierdiker Rebbe thought about it. The Frierdiker Rebbe talked about it. The Rebbe is doing it through us. And that's a chassid. I hope I answered the question honestly without avoiding it. Now you're free to ask me questions on my answer, but raise your hands. Go ahead, in the back.
Can you be a chassid in Chabad without a beard?
Can you be a chassid Chabad without a beard? I don't think a chassid Chabad is defined by any one action. Chassid Chabad is a worldview. Chassid Chabad is a definition of self. You can't be a Chassid Chabad and be a cynic. You can't be a Chassid Chabad just trying to get out of it. But if you have a problem growing a beard for whatever reason, but you feel bad about it and you wish you had a beard, which is the word that you use. You don't keep halacha, but you're growing. In other words, not you don't keep halacha because you don't care about halacha. So I think, listen, the Lubavitch Chassidim in Russia, most of them didn't have beards. It was a sakana. Now, if you're living in Brooklyn, you don't have a beard, fair. Even hippies have beards today. But everybody is in a different place. People are in different places in their lives. And it's okay to grow. Sincerely, mitanemis. Not where your attitude is, how can I get away with it? I was in California, and I was speaking in a shul, and a girl walked up to me, a woman, she's in her 30s, who learned by me many years ago, and I didn't remember her. I have so many students. And her hair's not covered, and she very proudly introduced herself to me. My name is such and such, and with these years. Geguckt. She looked at me, looking at her like, what do you look like? She didn't understand what I wanted. I didn't say anything. If I had known before that she's not wearing a sheitel, I would have behaved. But like, really? Really? You learned the Machon Chana, you walk around without a sheitel? I don't know. He said, Meveget, and it hurt me. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should have been so wonderful and not maybe, for sure. But you need to be warned. Everybody has their limitations. Anyway, any other questions or comments?
You go through the questions.
I can't hear you.
Are we able to go through these questions?
We're going to go through them. It's going to take time. Okay, next question. We're done? Yeah. Next question. Okay.